So this episode of Talking in the Chasm is filmed before a live audience. Again.
Woo!
And my wife, Sarah, suggested that we maybe have a little
discourse, a little discussion about what we're doing
maybe
here.
a disclaimer. I don't know. But we kind of wanted to be clear that we are not experts at the topics that we discuss. This is not about teaching folks and trying to change people's minds, or even each other's. It's really more about understanding each other and sort of, I'm very interested in Matthew and how he lives, and I'm fascinated by it. He's a super smart guy, and I want to know like how his mind works. So this is more about, it is possible for people with absolutely polar opposite worldviews to love each other and have a conversation.
I think so. First of all, I've already been surprised at how much response there's been to our first two videos.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. And I think it has caused conversations between you and I about like, well, some people will actually watch this maybe.
Yeah, people care.
So what do we think about what we're doing? And I think the way as we talked, the way I summed it up in the text is that our expertise that we're trying to convey is communication, not that we understand the science of life or biochemistry or
we have no idea what we're
neuroscience.
Talking about.
Yeah, we don't know anything. I'm a sheetrocker and you're a musician, so don't take anything at face value we say.
Yeah.
But if there's something, I think what we have to contribute is, and it's the way I've been publicizing what we're trying to do, trying to return civility to discourse,
right.
To be kind to people. And I'll just speak to the Christian side of the audience. There's something different about caring for people because you care for them, and engaging with people because you want to make them different. And that's sensed by the people that we talk to. And I genuinely believe the things I believe, and I want everybody in the world to believe what I believe. But that's not why I engage with people. That's not why I have friends. That's not the substance of why I love
yeah,
people.
and I would say I don't necessarily want people to believe what I believe, but I want people to understand me.
Yeah,
you know? I want people to understand why I believe what I believe, I guess.
Well, I'm a proselytizer.
Yeah, right? That's a religion. Let's get into that. What were we going to talk about?
We were going to talk about mental health.
Yes.
And
medication, suicide, and a little bit of sort of Christian science, and when is it okay to step in, and when do you just let God handle it?
Mm-hmm.
So you've had some challenges with your children, some of your kids.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk about that? Well, let's start with your. I'd like to know how you talk to God about Cephas.
Yeah.
Maybe mention his.
Cephas is our 10th child, and he has a very, very rare genetic disorder. It's de novo. It doesn't come from Eric or I. It's just a random mutation, a 1 in a trillion. I don't know what the odds are. But he has a gene with a mutation that causes certain effects in his body. He's one of, there's 2 studies that have come out on this disorder. It was discovered at the time he was 2 years old. So it was completely unknown. And the studies, Erica knows as much about it as probably anybody that's not a researcher that's worked on those projects. And as far as we can tell, there's probably less than 50 people in the world that they know have this particular mutation.
So there's not a rush to find a cure.
No, it's a very small number of people that are affected, and we don't know what all the effects are. What that resulted in is that for his first year, remember, he's number 10, so there's a whole bustling household with
Right,
homeschool and a business and everything else going on. His first year, Erica had more than 300 discrete appointments, medical appointments, in the first year of his life.
That's crazy.
He was casted, he was under anesthesia, under general anesthesia several times, and we had other things going on as well. You know, Erica was diagnosed with epilepsy during that time. She had just come off of a very, very bad pregnancy, a horrible mistreatment with a dental procedure. Like, things were off the rails for about 2 years, and slowly they've gotten better. We were at Boston Children's Hospital, and we're so grateful to be around some of the best doctors for his condition in the world, probably.
Yeah, for sure. Possible.
So plenty to be grateful for, but a very, very difficult couple of years. And so as that pertains to mental health, I've never been a depressive kind of person. It's not how I cope with the world. It's not something that I've suffered with. It's not an affliction that I've had. I can think of a handful of times when I could feel like I could say I feel like I was depressed, and they were very causal related. Things were going on in my life, and it was sensible to feel depressed about it. But that amount of stress will have all kinds of outcomes in different ways. I think that one of the ways that for me, I think it's a little bit different for Erica, but for me, there's some bedrock kind of things in my life that help keep me stable through those things. I wonder often, those things are all functions of my Christianity and my community, and I don't know how it works if you don't have those kinds of things. You know, for those 300 appointments, we lived in co-housing community with people that I loved like my own family, and we could just open the back door and go to meetings and know that someone was there to help with our children. You know, the older children were there to watch, but the Hornings were downstairs and they were listening, and we could call them and say, hey, can you check on things and make sure everything's all right? And that, like, I don't know what you'd do without that.
Right.
But then somebody to pray with us, and somebody to cry with us, and somebody to care with us, and a whole community of people that we felt like it wasn't only our problem. And I think those are some of there's more kind of esoteric things about my own faith that I think I use to work through those difficulties. But those are the practical things that have helped us. Let me just tag on to that. I've had a very complicated relationship with medicine and science over the since I've been married and having children. And part of that's due to mistrust, part of it's due to misinformation, part of it's due to youth and craziness. Like, I thought, there was a time in my life and I thought, hey, we just believe God and we don't have to deal with doctors anymore. Seriously, I had 3 of our children were born at home without midwives, because here's what happened. We had a child in the hospital, and then we had another child in the hospital, and then we had a midwife, and the midwife's gig was like, childbirth is a natural process, it's not a sickness, it doesn't belong in a hospital. And I was like, well, if that's the case, then what do we need you for? So we did the next 3 without a midwife, just Erica and I.
She talked herself right out of the job. Hang on one second. All right.
Where do we pick up? Confusing medical.
Yeah.
There's an interplay between faith and medicine for me. I'm not going to speak for people broadly, because there's all kinds of different ways that different Christian people deal with that. For me, there's been a real complex interplay between faith and medicine, because I do believe in a real God, and I do believe that He's actively involved in my life and other people's lives, and I really have built a life out of taking confidence in that. The same kind of confidence I have to trust my community when we have a medical crisis.
Well, can I ask you something about?
Sure.
So Cephas had some serious issues. I don't know. We haven't really discussed he had bone disorders.
He has. So there's several complications. One of them is that he has. At the time when that gene expresses, there's a few things that are happening in a developing fetus. One is that the arm bones are separating. This starts as one bone and it separates into two, and that's the radius and ulnar, and the radius rotates around the ulnar. So those two bones that cause us to be able to do that turn into one. It's called, his disorder is called MECOM-associated disorder. It's the MECOM gene.
So he doesn't have two, he just has one?
It's two at the bottom and then it comes into one. It's more like a wishbone. So he has none of this rotation. And his orientation was out, which is the worst. I mean, it could have been more out, but it's past neutral out on both sides, and it's bilateral. So he can't ever, like, if he wants to touch his face, it was like this.
Yeah,
if he wants to hold a dinner plate, it's like this.
A spoon, right.
He also has some anomalies in connective tissue genes that are inherited from his mother, and we don't know exactly what all those do. But the other thing about Cephas is that at the same time that this arm bone is fusing, you're also developing bone marrow and what becomes the system that creates blood. So one of the first studies where this disorder was discovered was from Japan. It was all Japanese children, and all of them were born with leukemia and needed bone marrow transplants at birth. He had low blood platelets, but not at a dangerous level. And so it's something that we go to Dana-Farber once a year to check in on his platelet levels, and we kind of have to, because we don't know. We don't know, will it express itself later and he'll have bone marrow problems, or did he dodge the bullet and it'll never be a problem for him? We don't know.
So I guess, what I want to ask is, I don't know really how to put this in better words, but are people broken? Like, God made this little creature, and then, you and science and everything decided to step in and make his arms do this, and change these different things and have all these different operations. At what point do you pray and sort of that's enough, or when do you actually step in and do physical things? And we could talk a little bit about my mother after I hear you answer that, because my mother's a Christian Scientist and she has very, very specific,
well-defined ideas about that. I think that's a complex question. There's all of the interdependent variables are at play. I think the root of your question is, are people broken? And yes, they are. In theological terms, it's what we call theodicy, or more commonly the problem of evil. Why are things broken? There are broken things in the world, the environment's falling apart, our bodies are falling apart, we all die. Like, these are all broken things. So what that comes from and how it makes sense in relation to the God that's being advocated by the Bible is that there's a whole discussion to be had about how to rationalize a broken world with a good God. It's a very valid question, by the way. It's one of the oldest critiques of Christianity since there was Christianity.
So do you see Cephas when he was first born and just thought, well, there's brokenness in the world and it's just manifested here and we're going to do what we can to fix it?
I don't know if I consciously worked through it in that way. I think when he was born we were like, oh, there's a beautiful baby, I love him.
Yeah.
But when we interact with the hardness around his life and the difficulties that we've had,
I mean, it's tough because you say, oh, what about a Christian Scientist that has a child with, a disorder that they'll die without medication? I mean, that's like a theoretical, and then here it is, bam, you are actually faced right now with this child is going to require surgery after surgery after surgery.
I never hesitated to give him medical care. That was never a question in my mind. And I don't know if when I was much more young and crazy, if I would have had more of an obstacle with that. I feel like God helped. When we talked in the last episode about spirituality, I was talking about prayer, and that one of my main default prayers is that God would help me be better at being what He wants me to be. And that process has been a trajectory for my whole life. And I can see places where my life has taken turn after turn after turn in a consistent direction to teach me how to encounter the things that I'm dealing with now.
I mean, to me, that's amazing to hear you say that, because I feel like prayer for most people who call themselves Christians is, God, do this for me. You know, God, I have a problem, fix it. Whereas you seem to be, God, help me to deal with the problems that I have.
Well, I think there's some reasons
not...
why that is. My conceptualization, I think I'm going to risk offending some people, but I think my conceptualizations around Christianity are much more ancient. They're not predicated on the American version of Christianity. Right. I'm not saying that I'm not affected by American culture. I certainly am. But my theology and the way that I think about God and who He is and what He's doing in the world is much smaller than the evangelical version. Like I put myself.
So the word
in a
prayer
much
just
smaller
means
place.
Something different to you than it does for
it means
people who
communicating
go to church
with
Sunday
God.
Every,
you know, it's not.
Right.
It's not proper to understand prayer as Tim Tebow asking for a touchdown.
Right.
Like, He's not a genie. And I think I have a different conceptualization of God. I'm glad that if I could meet with the most powerful man in the world in the morning, what am I going to tell him? What am I going to ask him for $5? Am I going to ask him to buy breakfast? Like, what would that experience look like? If you have an audience with the most powerful person, or the most rich person, or the most whatever, how would you use that time effectively? Like, to understand who He is and how He got there and how you could be more like that would really be the right way to think of that opportunity. And when I get on my knees, when I am alone with my God, even when I pray with the church, that's us interacting with who we believe created reality. Right. And access to all knowledge and all power. So what do I want to tap into? Do I want a touchdown? Do I want money? Do I want happiness? Do I want trivial things? Do I even want health? Or do I want to understand myself? Do I want to understand the world? Do I want to understand what really matters?
Yeah, but certainly you would want Cephas to be healthy.
Absolutely.
You would want Cephas to not feel pain and to go through this world.
Absolutely.
You know.
But I understand also that pain has a value. And this is a hard thing. It's hard to say that about somebody else's pain, but because it's our pain, I feel like I can say there are all kinds of things that have shaped us through His pain. Like, we're different parents. We have a different relationship and a different interaction with the world, with special needs communities. Sure. It's shaped us to be better people. And it doesn't always work that way, but there's a way to respond to tragedy and to problems that can make us better if we figure out how to take it the right way.
Right. So I have a couple of stories. One is about Are People Broken? Mm. So my sister had Down syndrome. She was developmentally disabled. I took care of her for the last 5 years of her life, and then she died tragically. And I then began to work for the people that provided housing for her, and so now I work with developmentally disabled adults. That's what I do for a living now.
I did it for many years too.
It's wonderful,
yeah.
And it's very difficult for me to look at some of these folks and imagine them as broken. When I was in high school, I wrote a paper about happiness, talking about my sister, and I was like, my sister needs a TV guide, Little House on the Prairie, bag of Doritos and a Coke. And that's it. And I mean, she's so happy.
Bliss.
And me, I need a girlfriend, I need a car, I need, lots of friends and stuff to do, and I need movies, and I mean, it's like, I need so much more. It's like, who's winning this? Who's more advanced? Who's happier? So, especially with Down syndrome, if you could tell me, I have a medication that would eradicate Down syndrome, I am not sure that I would give it to a child of mine that had Down syndrome. I mean, it's Down syndrome especially. It's like tends to create these creatures who are just happy and loving and open and kind and generous. And that they need care. More care than maybe you or I for the rest of their lives is a small price to pay. I mean, when you compare that to a room full of Enron executives,
I'll take the Downs kids.
Seriously.
Yeah.
So what's broken here? I mean, to me, the Enron executives are broken.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to think of it that way. And then the other story I have is my mother and my brother are both Christian Scientists, and I don't know if you know about Christian Science, but basically
only the sketches.
Yeah, this woman Mary Baker. I'm gonna just insult everybody because I don't know either. But this woman Mary Baker Eddy got sick. She was very religious, and she read the Bible and managed to sort of heal herself. And she thought that she had read the Bible in a way that maybe people hadn't done before, that she had used it in a way, in the way that she studied. So she wrote a book that you're supposed to read with the Bible called Keys to the Scriptures, Science and Health with Keys to the Scriptures. And it's basically just, Bible study. It's like, here's, we're going to talk about this, and then you read this part of the Bible, and we're going to talk about it.
So that means.
Yeah, and every week, and it's a lot of study and reading and self-reflection. But one of the sort of concept is that the material world doesn't exist. Okay, so there is just the spiritual world, and this is sort of an echo, and I don't know. It is that
it's like a kind of a mirage or something.
Yeah, or like a broken mirror that we're looking into. It's like we're not really, there is no sickness. It was something, Jesus died, and when he arose, then that he's perfect, and there's no sickness in the world, and so it's an illusion. So if you tell me you have a headache, well, you don't. There's no such thing. You're a perfect being. So that it's some sort of weird illusion. And what you can do is you can talk to a Christian Scientist, and they can sort of help you understand why it is that you think you feel this way. But through prayer and study,
you can work it out.
You can heal yourself. You'll go away.
But they still die.
Right, and the idea is, they still break their arms, and so
wear glasses and.
Right, I mean, if you break your arm, what are you going to not set it? And interesting enough, my brother has a daughter who has diabetes. So there's the question right there. There's the thought experiment, right? It's like, what if you have a child with diabetes? What are you going to do? Let her die? You're going to let her, So of course she takes insulin and lives. And if he broke his arm, my brother would go to a hospital and get it set. And here's where I don't fully understand. Maybe we'll have him on a show and he can explain it, because I don't really understand. But it was something about, you can take the material world and do it that way, go to a doctor, get it set, or you can do it the spiritual way, but you can't do both. And you can do it on a case-by-case basis. So you can say, okay, well, I broke my arm, I'm going to just set that, rather than study and pray and it's going to heal itself. So I'm not really sure exactly how that works. But it was interesting to me that my mother saw her daughter as, not being disabled in this world.
Because of her Christian Science.
Because of her Christian Science.
So she was
rather
perfect. This was a manifestation in this.
Right, but then she also hounded her all the time about being overweight and about not being polite to people, and she was always yelling at her. I mean, so it's, rather than just looking at her and saying she's perfect as she is, the fact that she weighs 250 pounds and she's 4 feet tall doesn't make any difference to anything. If she's happy, that's what we want. We want her to live as long as she can and be happy and whatever. So it's just interesting that my mother wasn't able to just see the reality and just say, that's okay.
I was watching somebody and they were talking about it's a philosophical framework for clusters of virtue, and what he was trying to explain was that you might have seen it. Take a word like health. Well, health means something, and we all mean something when we say health. But what exactly is health? Is it having a beating heart? Is it not hurting? Is it whatever? Well, you can have a beating heart and hurt. Are you still healthy? So there's not a thing that is health. And I think what we're talking about whether it's quality of life or, if we compare the CEO to the Downs people that we've known and loved, that's an easy equivalency. But they may be well in certain ways and broken in certain ways. Right. And they're not mutually exclusive. They don't mean the same thing. Right. But with Downs so mental health would be a good correlation for that, right? There could be ways in which we're healthy and ways in which maybe your body's works, nothing wrong with it. You could run a marathon, but your mind is sick or not well. Or
are you talking about me?
No.
I run marathons and I take medication for depression. We'll talk about that. It's okay. But the thing about Downs is the thing that's wrong, right, with the brain is what makes them the interesting, wonderful, beautiful people that they are. So it's just I just don't think that's wrong. Yeah. And when we were pregnant with our kids, they said, we can do this test just to test in the womb whether they're Down syndrome. Yeah. And I'm like, so you could abort because they're going to be these happy, wonderful, delightful creatures that just make everybody smile? I mean, I don't even understand. I just don't see that as broken. It's like, the deaf community. Yeah. There's people who are deaf who say, well, this is the way that I am. It's not broken or better or worse. It's the same way. Yeah. So you can look at it as a disability, or you can look at it as this is who I am.
Yeah. In Finland, from what I understand, they have effectively 0 Down syndrome because they're all aborted. They're eradicating Downs.
Yeah, but they're not eradicating the Enron executives. So, yeah. Yeah. Pity that.
We'd be better off.
So, anyway, let's talk about mental health. I want to just tell you about myself. Sure. I'm sure we've talked about this before, but I do suffer from depression, and I am bipolar. I've taken medication since I was 22 years old. I'm 50 now. And I tried to kill myself when I was 21. And it was very serious. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, my girlfriend left me. It was actually a philosophical, I did not want to be part of this world where people treat each other the way that they do, and every thing just felt like violence. And I decided I was going to kill myself. I had a date planned out when my dad was going to be out of town. He wouldn't have to find the body. My stepbrother, who barely knows me, I just had it all planned out on a calendar. It was all set. It didn't work, and then they found out that I was depressed, and they gave me medication, which also didn't work for 20 years. I just thought, well, this is who I am. I'm just a depressed person. And then they finally did, very recently, find medication that works. So I have sort of relief from this sort of feeling of just constant, I just have to fight to be happy. Some people are just happy, and some people just have to work really, really hard at it. It's a lot easier for me now, but I also run marathons, and I'm perfectly healthy. Physically, you would not look to me and say he's sick. Mm-hmm. But it also has defined a lot of who I am, and it's made me think a lot about the world, and it's part of, and if you go, oh, well, what would you trade in order to be happy? It's would I have to trade, my ability to make music? Or would, it's really hard. It's part of who I am. It's hard to say I'm broken, because if I was a happy person, I would not be me. I would be something different. Yeah. And maybe something better. But I don't know that, So it's just it's difficult when we talk about broken people and what's broken and what's not broken.
Yeah, and from a Christian worldview, something I've been trying to understand is how to engage with mental health issues. So here's some theses I have, some speculations. Let's put it that way. I think that there are real physicalities attached to mental health issues. I also believe in not quite at the level of the Christian Scientist, but I do believe that there are sometimes supernatural causes for what we consider mental distress. A very small version of that would be like the feelings that we all associate with guilt. Like when you're guilty about something, you don't feel well, and you can project that. You can do all kinds of manifestations with something that's actually in you, and it has all these ramifications. So there's a whole realm of mental health that's behaviorally connected, and there's probably a combination of all those things. But then also, when we talk about medication, and I'm way out of my league here, but it seems like the world is on fire with antidepressants. Like, it's literally in the fish now. Like, we are flushing.
Right.
So much antidepressants are going through our systems and out our bowels and urine that we're toxifying fish with the dope that we're taking.
Right. I mean, there certainly is a lot of good that has come out of medicine, and there certainly is a lot of bad that has come out of medicine.
Like the Oxycontin problem.
Yeah, and I feel like when ADHD was diagnosed at first, and
all our little brothers were on it.
All of a sudden, everybody has ADHD. Mm-hmm. I was a Big Brother in the Big Brothers program, and I had a little brother who had ADHD, and I mean, his eyeballs would not stop fluttering. Like he could not be still for 2 seconds. I mean, it was this pathological, something is very wrong.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel a little bit like rambunctious children get sent to the doctor because the teachers are having a hard time controlling them, and the doctor's like, why not?
It's like a chemical restraint.
We'll just, it's not going to hurt anything. We'll just try it. See what happens. Which is sort of, when I was diagnosed with depression, they actually prescribed Prozac because you can't overdose on Prozac, and I was a suicide risk. So they're like, oh, just try it. See what happens. They were just Prozac for everything because, I mean, why not? To see, And so that, I think, is irresponsible and dangerous. And I think you got to really, ADHD, there's a difference between that and...
So one of the things that we've done with that as a community, as a Christian community, it's an intensive process to join our community. Like, it's not like the Baptist church on the corner. You don't just show up and a part of our church because we're communities and because we're interconnected in family-style structures. So there's a process by which people come, work from the outer edges of association with the church to the inner core of the church. And part of that process is that we do something called a spiritual assessment, where we sit down and talk about really comprehensive things in your life. How does your marriage work? How does your child training work? How do you view the scriptures? What's going on in your life? And one of the questions we ask people in that assessment is, do you struggle with depression? And we always tell people it's not because, like, if you answer yes, you don't get into the church. Yeah. It's because we love our people. And if that's a concern, if that's something that people struggle with in their life, we want to help. We want to be there. We want to be a part of the support structure that finds either coping mechanisms or paths to treatment or whatever the case may be, so that we can be a support and help people. And I wonder how much is missing in the holistic treatment of mental health issues. How much lack of community, lack of
for sure
cognitive behavior therapies and counseling, and like this whole panoply of options that all of them are trying to deal with a piece of it.
Right.
And medicine is one little part of that. but a healthy, engaged community and setting relationships in order and exercise and eating right and all these things are also just as important. It's not just show up at a doctor's office and get a script and then you'll be okay.
Right.
At the same time, I don't want to be dismissive of the real physicality that's involved in people's struggles. That
right. I mean,
I
you
don't
know,
want to be dismissive.
you know,
it's not really.
For me, they just, you know, they say, oh, your brain's not producing this chemical, and we're gonna offset that with this chemical, and we're gonna see what happens. And you know, it took a lot of years of tweaking and figuring it out. But there's a huge difference in the way that I see the world now and the way that I did when I was 20. I mean, enormous. My grandfather killed himself, and he also had bipolar disorder, and apparently it's hereditary. So, you know, because I understand that, it's easy for me to then to understand when people say, oh, you know, I have this disorder. And because of my experience with, you know, I've known people who have been prescribed ADHD who, in my opinion, were not clinically,
Yeah.
and I've known people that, you know, like I said, my little brother who absolutely required it. So I think we talked about this a little bit last time, that we're sort of in the dark ages with how the brain works. We just don't really know.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is experimenting. And I mean, this is, you know, I mean, for me, I'm on 5 different medications right now, 5 separate medications for my depression and anxiety. And it just took forever to finally tweak this thing to where it was at this place, and now it is. And that's crazy.
Do you think, this is a completely subjective question, do you think that depression and mental health issues are more common, we'll play our part as the old men, are more common today than they were in the past? Are we in a mental health crisis as a culture? Are we doing things to cause it?
I don't think that it's
just diagnostics.
I don't think that it's more prevalent. I think that it's just being diagnosed now, whereas before it wasn't. Before you were just crazy,
drunk, or
and
you hit your wife, or you
or, you know,
disappeared for a few
you
days
went
at
to
a time.
war and you came back and you overdosed on heroin, and that's what happened. I mean, you know, we don't talk about what happened to your brain during the time of war. So I would say that that we are now better at diagnosing. Maybe too good.
Yeah.
But we certainly are diagnosing issues that we didn't even know. I mean, PTSD is a perfect example of that. We didn't know what that was. We just called it in World War I the 1,000-yard stare.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah. I don't know. My jury's still out. I'm.
On what?
On whether or not we have more mental health issues contemporarily than in the past. I
mean, maybe our definition of mental health issues has also become more permissive.
Expansive,
you know. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe that's the meeting
because
in the
I mean,
middle.
a paranoid schizophrenic is it's a very different animal from an ADHD.
Sure.
Or, you know, even somebody with I mean, you know, so I don't know what, you know, in my profession I've met people who have schizophrenia, and they see horrible things happening to things right in front of their faces in the room while you're talking to them. I mean, you know, it's a living nightmare.
Yeah.
So mental disorders exist. It's a real thing. We just have to figure out, you know, like I said, we're still bumbling around trying to figure out how the brain works.
Yeah.
But it's interesting when we talk about, like, Christian Science and stuff, the brain, you know, can heal you. You know, I mean, you can pray to God and feel like He's answering you, and therefore your positive outset makes you make micro decisions that help in your well-being. You know, and you know, you can raise boils on your hand by thinking about it. I mean, you know, and what's it called with the
acupressure?
No, the people that bleed from the hands and the
stigmata,
you know, stuff like that. It's like your brain is pretty amazing, and you can do some pretty amazing things with the mind. They say that placebo
Yeah.
works,
Absolutely.
even if you're told it's a placebo.
And
All right, so
the placebo effect is growing.
right, and
It's getting better.
I don't want to say that prayer is placebo
Uh-huh.
because this is your world.
Uh-huh.
I don't want to minimize it, but to say that I prayed and I got better is different to me than saying I prayed and you got better.
Yeah.
You know, and that's where Christian Science to me is like, that's, you do whatever you want for your own. So you get sick and you don't want to take medication, that's on you. You have a child and he gets sick and you don't give him medication, that's where I have a problem.
Yeah.
You know, and interesting enough, my mom got cancer, stomach cancer.
What'd she do?
Went to a doctor.
Good for her.
Yeah, and you know, the doctor fixed her using 20th century medicine.
I think that prayer as placebo could be taken wrong. I think it could also be taken right. I think that
It's a horrible thing to say. I'm not saying prayer is placebo. I'm just saying that the brain.
What I'm saying is that it may actually be placebo. I think that there's an effect of prayer that is exactly that. That God designed our minds to be power over our body, at least within certain parameters, and setting your mind in order. So, so I was just talking to somebody about. It's funny how much prayer is coming up here, but. I was just talking to somebody, a young man who's struggling in his life. He's trying to get order. He's trying to figure out what he's doing with himself. He's been struggling with addiction, all these things. And I've been talking to him, and he started praying. He started reading the Bible. We started having conversations. He started trying to fix some relationships and fix some discipline issues in his life and all this stuff. And it's starting to go a little bit better for him. So I'd been thinking about him and praying about him, and I pray about you by the way, quite often. But I was talking to him, and I said,
and I appreciate it.
I know you do. I know you do. I had just been listening to who was I listening to? Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. Thinking Fast and Slow. That's the name of the book. I can't remember the author. But he's talking in there about the power of priming, psychological priming. So you know this, have you seen these experiments? They bring you in and they tell you some ruse. It's about memorization or whatever, and they have grad students read a list of words. And they say, okay, now we want you to go over to this other building and you're going to do something over there. Well, the real test is walking from building to building. So they bring grad students in, you read a bunch of words about old people. It's arthritis and Florida and retirement and whatever.
They walk slower.
They walk slower than people that don't. And it's not a huge impact, but it's a definite impact. And you can do it with words about money. You can do it with all kinds of things. So the whole advertising industry is based on these priming principles. Well, I was telling this young guy, look, if you start your day thinking about virtue and righteousness and goodness and love and mercy and kindness and how to be the best person you can in connection with your Creator, that has to have a priming effect on what you do for the rest of the day.
In that way, I would agree, absolutely, prayer works. It absolutely. Because that's what, if that, it wouldn't work for me because I don't believe that there's a God that's listening. And I appreciate that you pray for me because it just makes me realize that you love me and that you care in the way that you do. So that makes me happy. And when I'm happy, I'm a better person. So it works. Do you know what I mean? So it's a little bit like the beauty thing. It's like, you can dig down and see a scientific reason for all of this stuff. It's like, I just look at the world as just from the science of it. But let's just quickly about suicide and stuff. It's a sin. And tell me what you think about that.
Well, I think that it's very much in line with the ideas that I would have expressed in regards to abortion, that life is a divine value, that it has one source, that life comes from God, and it's not right to take it. Now, it bothers me a great deal when people profess that value and aren't at all consistent about it. Not even trying to. Like, we would be against abortion, but we would be for bombing Yemeni children at a wedding so we could kill a terrorist. Like, that kind of inconsistency is infuriating to me, and it bothers me more than people that just don't accept the premise at all. So what I would say is that creates a holistic view about everything that has to do with life. So suicide would be included in that. Now, it's a really sad construct. It's a horrible thing to take another person's life. To take your own life is a horrible thing too. Not in the same way. I don't. They're not morally equivalent in the damage that it does to the. I don't know how to say it. They're not the same thing. I'll say that. I think it's wrong, like unequivocally wrong, because it's wrong for the same reason that it's wrong for me to kill you.
Because you're extinguishing the light.
Because you're taking something that's not yours to take, and that's a problem. And I think it's a problem for society. It's a problem for individuals. It's a problem for families. It's a problem for children.
So it's difficult to talk about this because it's hard to say pro-suicide. It's hard to say it's okay to kill yourself because there's ways out, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if somebody was in constant physical torturous pain and they wanted to die to end that pain, I would have no problem with that. I'd be like, sure, I'll help you, right? I mean, so assisted dying, I'm absolutely 100% for. And the fact that you can't see depression, doesn't make it less painful. Doesn't if you're living your days every single day, you wake up. I mean, this is what it was when I was 20. I woke up every single morning. I'm like, oh, I'm still alive. Like I could not wait till the day was over and I could go back to sleep where I would just be unconscious. Just existing was torturous every day. Mm-hmm. And so there was this really great comic that I read, and this guy like has his hand is all smashed and it's all bloody and gross, and he's in agonizing pain, and his friends are like, oh, what, is it your hand again? Jeez, I mean, just get over it, oh, you need to just
I can catch a frisbee fine.
Yeah, I got a paper cut the other day. It hurt a lot, but I mean, you don't see me whining about it all the time, and it's just getting grosser and grosser, and it's more and more painful. And that's a little bit what it's like for me, because it's not like, oh, I can just not think about it. It is in agonizing pain. It's like it takes so much of my mind. It's hard for me to listen to people. It's hard for me to pay attention to anything when there's this screaming pain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if you look at depression like that, I've oftentimes, when I have heard of people killing themselves who really were depressed and really seemed to have tried everything, part of me is just like, well, they're at peace. It's what they wanted, and they got what they wanted, and I should be happy about that. But I have a weird, distorted view of that coming from my own history.
Well, you have a personalized view of it. I'm glad you failed.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not glad for your pain, but I'm glad you failed.
1 month after I tried to kill myself, I met my wife, Sarah, and she is just like, where I'm just jumping around, she's this sort of calming, she makes me still. Mm-hmm. And that has, helped a lot. I was still depressed and the medication was working, and still had a tough time, but she was always there to make it okay. When I first met her, I was like, you don't get involved, don't become attached to me, because I'm not going to be around here very long. This is no way am I going to continue to live like this. And she made it great. I mean, you were talking about sort of the holistic. Mm-hmm. It's all interconnected, and certainly I'm alive because of Sarah. No question.
So now when you assess the situation of suicide, it seems like you still retain sympathy for 20-year-old Felix.
I do, and what's interesting is people go, oh, I bet you're glad it didn't work. No. You know, I wanted to be dead. I would have been dead, and then, you know, fade to black, and none of this would have existed. I don't. That'd have been fine too.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that I'm happy and have a great life and have wonderful children and just everything is great right now for me is awesome, but it doesn't make what I wanted invalid.
It's hard.
I mean, I know that's weird.
Yeah, it's hard for me
hear.
to assimilate to that. I mean, I think I can understand what you're saying, and the reasons why you'd say that. But knowing you and knowing your family, the value of you being alive has been immense. And I think if I try to empathize, if I try to put myself in your shoes, as 50-year-old Felix, I'd be saying to 20-year-old Felix, hey man, it's going to be okay.
Right.
Don't do it.
Right.
We
I
can
didn't
get
have
through
anybody
this.
to tell me that. And I didn't know that.
Would
that
it be
was
valuable for so if you met 20-year-old Felix, but his name's Bill, and he says, man, I'm in misery, I'm just going to kill myself, I'm so tired of it. And he explains the situation, why he's in there, and everything he's tried to do to make it better. Is the final, like he says, what should I do, Felix? Is the final counsel, yeah, I understand, man, it's, you got to do what you got to do? Or is it does get better. There are things that can make life meaningful again.
Yeah, this is the problem with. This is a major chasm between our worldviews, I think, because I feel like, you know, it might get better. Mm-hmm. It might not get better.
Yeah.
I don't know this person, and I don't know. You know, I wish that I could say, oh yeah, I did. In other words, for me, it's not about staying alive.
Yeah.
It's not about, oh, no, don't do it. It's going to get better. Just keep on plugging away. Keep on feeling that pain. Keep on waking up every day and wishing that you were dead. Just keep on, you know, it's going to, you know, you know. I can't say that if I knew that was the situation, if I knew that the pain was that great. I'm not going to tell somebody who is dying of an extremely painful bone cancer that they can't, you know, take barbiturates and end it. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's difficult to assess, but I'm so happy and I'm such a positive person and I love life so much. Yeah. It's just hard to wrap your head around the fact that people go, oh, are you glad it didn't happen? And my answer is not really. You know, I know that's weird, but yeah, I mean, I am happier than I've ever been in my entire life. Like, I'm so happy.
So what about?
And we'll actually have a show about happiness because it's the fact that I had these connections and the things that make me happy are things that I didn't even know I wanted. Like I wish I'd been taught that. Well, when we talk about school, I mean, there's a list of things that could have been actually taught to me, told to me, to make me a happier person.
So what about, let's just play the idea out here, what about things like the suicide prevention hotline? Like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Would people be better off?
It's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing because, you know, as I said, there was nobody to tell me that things are going to get better. I mean, certainly my friends said that. My friends didn't want me to die, you know, and I put them through hell, you know. But I think a lot of people feel like they have no way out and feel like there's no connection and don't understand and need a sort of a guiding hand to help them out of this darkness. And the suicide hotline can be that for a lot of people. I'm sure that it saves lots and lots of people. And I'm all for saving people.
Yeah. But you would just draw a line, you'd say, let's save people that want to be saved.
Right. I mean, you know, I don't know. Like, I'm just thinking, would I be a good person to man a suicide hotline? Maybe. Maybe I'd be the very best. I don't know. You know, I mean, I empathize with people. I'm very, you know, my superpower is to sort of feel the emotional temperature of the room. Mm-hmm. You know, when you're sad, I'm sad. Mm-hmm. It's hard for me to disengage from, you know, I can't talk when people are angry at me. I can't, you know, I get this crazy sort of feeling. So we lost a little bit of light, but that's okay.
Should we keep going or we're going to fix it?
We'll keep going because we have to. Actually, let's pause it for a second. Irene keeps going.
Yeah, I was like, don't say that.
Yeah. This is our.
You
our
gotta,
thing.
yeah, you gotta let's do it.
I mean, very specifically, like, don't say something that could cause a suicide is a pretty good rule of thumb, I'd say.
We're
I mean,
exploring ideas.
Have I said something that would cause people to commit suicide?
There was one thing, I forget exactly what you said, but like,
It's flickering.
yeah, that's awful.
It's a good thing Erica's not doing it.
Alright.
Something, yeah, the cat has noticed. I just think it might be that particular thing might be a little irresponsible.
I mean, I
To put on the internet, I mean.
Well, no, but I think we're talking it through, right? I mean,
and here's the other thing. Like, I have a friend in the Netherlands right now. They have state-endorsed euthanasia. She has depression, and she filed for a permit to commit suicide. Like, the state in the Netherlands is saying, yeah, it's bad for you, go ahead. Like, that's not a controversial thing in the Netherlands. It's not a controversial thing for the laws for euthanasia that they're advocating here in America. The state is saying, yeah, if it's bad enough, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean,
it just set off alarm bells in my brain, is
Right.
all.
I think that what my daughter is just mentioned to me about, oh my gosh, you're being irresponsible and people are gonna commit suicide after watching this. I think that what she said is very true. That when you are depressed,
You don't see.
you don't know what the scale is, right? It feels like a 10 all the time, right? So you're just like, oh, this is awful. It's never gonna get better. I'm gonna just kill myself. I don't really think.
I just don't like hearing that in that state is not going to be
Right.
what
the
people
best.
need to hear.
And if you were at that point and you are now not, that's kind of proof that it really can get better.
It absolutely can get better. It did get better for me. You know, this is my truth, you know? I mean, I'm just saying what I think and how it actually, how it worked for me.
Yeah.
Also, that wasn't a joke that I showed you on my phone when you were talking. That text, that was a genuine point.
What was it?
I said when you were talking about when you asked if there was like a mental.
We are recording.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's
Sorry.
fine. No, go.
Yes, there was a mental health epidemic, and I showed him a text that said kids these days have a lot of reasons to be depressed.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. But
The world.
yeah. But in World War II, you would be already in Europe fighting people. I mean, there's every generation has a.
I think the 60s are the craziest generation. We should talk about the 60s sometime. That was nuts. The president got shot.
All right, so we sort of fell apart, but how do we get back and what were we talking about? Because I don't want this to sound like an endorsement for suicide. It's very complicated and it's difficult to sort of say my position. But I would say that it wasn't just I'm depressed, right? I had these. I just remember, like, I couldn't stop thinking about the fact that, like, in order for me to live, things have to die, right? I have to even, like, lettuce, right? I have to rip this thing out of the ground, I have to put it in my mouth, I have to grind it with this violence and force it down into and it turns out, and it goes through my heart and it pumps the blood, and it's pounding, and just everything was violent. I'm lying in bed, my heart is pounding, and it's just like, this violence is just killing me. The fact that things have to die for me to live, I wasn't okay with that. Like, I don't like that concept, And I'm not talking about animals. I'm talking about, life. In order for life to continue, life has to end.
Well,
and I just was not okay with it.
That's
one of the many reasons why I, wanted to not be here anymore.
I was actually thinking about this about you just the other day because I was thinking about something that Jesus says. The alternative to that view, that everything is visceral and violent and ugly. And I'm not saying you hold that view now, but if I was to meet you then, what I would want to try to convince you of is that it doesn't, it's a marred prism. There's another way to see the exact same things as reciprocity, as a cycle of life and death, and
That's
that
how I
we're
see it
all in
now.
the middle of it.
No, that's how I see it now. I'm fascinated with like predator prey videos, seeing a cheetah take down a zebra. I think that's beautiful. It is beautiful. It's this amazing thing. I mean, life is amazing to me, and that cycle, even the violence is amazing.
Jesus teaches this principle about it's literally the words hate your life, lose your life. These are expressions that Jesus uses for his disciples. He says, unless you lose your life, you can't find it. And here's his example. He says, a kernel of wheat, and in the Bible I use wheat, it's like corn. It says a kernel of corn, but it's talking about a wheat. Like you have a head of wheat and it's got 50 little seeds on it. He said, a kernel of wheat, unless it falls into the ground and dies, abideth alone. Its whole purpose for that seed to grow up, for that flower to come, for all that life, is to fall into the ground and multiply.
Right.
And that cycle, that reality that the earth is built on, it doesn't have to be viewed from the prism of violence and death. It can be renewal and resurgence. And when I think about my food, especially if we're talking about carrots, like the fact that you take one out and you put another one in and 10 more come out, like that's amazing. It's like that's the most beautiful life story that there is. It's just a matter of which lens you're looking at it through.
Right. Yeah. And I was hoping to maybe we'll do a show about sort of the interconnectedness of all things, but there's this fantastic book that I read called The Seven Mysteries of Life by Guy Murchie. And one of the things that he talks about is this predator-prey thing, that perhaps that prey are put on this earth to be prey, and that's okay, that they fulfill this function.
That's their job to do.
That's fine, right? And he talks about when the lion takes the zebra, there's a point at which the zebra just kind of gives up, even though he's not dead, because often they'll give up and the lion, and then it gets up and runs away, right? But this sort of acceptance of your role, right? And this fascinating story. He says that there was a hunter hunting tigers or something in India, and got separated from his party, and was wading through the river and came upon a tiger, and went to shoot the tiger, but his ammunition had gotten wet and it didn't work, and the tiger attacked him and drug him by the shoulder to her cave, where she had little cubs. And the little tiger cubs, she was teaching them how to handle prey, so she would let him crawl away, and then the cubs would grab him and pull him back. And he said that it took 3 hours of that, and then his friends found him and shot the tigers, right? But he said when the tiger attacked him and he looked into the eyes of the tiger, he just was like he had never seen anything more beautiful in his entire life. He was in rapture when this tiger took him, and that the whole ordeal, he said, was about as pleasant as a half hour in the dentist chair. He's like, and so there's this concept of like, okay, now I'm prey, and that's okay. It's like not everything is a struggle. It doesn't always have to be. A lot of people look at the lion attacking the zebra, just like, that's awful. It's horrible. The poor zebra,
Yeah. Well, let's wrap up. I think that we want to make sure and communicate that we want to be hopeful for people. We want people to find support networks that whether it's mental health problems or whatever the crisis is in people's lives, find people that can help.
For sure.
Some links in the description.
There's a
of
way
the
out,
video.
for sure. And when I say people dying of bone cancer that are in incredible pain, what percentage of the population would that be?
Yeah.
And so people with depression that are actually in that much pain, it's a pretty small group. It feels like, I think when you're depressed, it always feels like you're at 100. You know, it's never going to get better. But that's broken thinking. You know, because it does get better. You've seen it happen. You know, so to say that it never will is broken thinking, and that's different than intense agonizing pain.
Yeah.
So I'm not advocating suicide. Just let's be clear.
Oh, glad. All right. Well, thanks.
All right. Love it.